The smell of machine oil and sawdust was a comforting counterpoint to the quiet despair of Monday morning. Adam leaned back on his worn workshop stool, nursing a fresh coffee. The memory of the ocean, the clean salt air and the blinding sunlight was already fading under the fluorescent hum of his garage. "1 week of sanity, Adam," Charlie grumbled, meticulously cleaning rust off a colossal wrench. "And now we're back to fixing municipal pumps and arguing with zoning commissions. I could use another year." "The real world demands tribute, Charlie," Adam said, forcing a pragmatic tone. He was already feeling the familiar reluctant pull back to the chaos of his specialized labor. The silence of their quiet street was violently interrupted by the low, expensive hum of an high-end electric vehicle. The sound died instantly outside their reinforced garage door. The door, designed to resist break-ins, was given a sharp, authoritative rap. Adam exchanged a look with Charlie. No client ever just showed up. Adam opened the small side entrance. Standing there was a man who radiated cold authority, Mr. Sterling, impeccably dressed in a severe charcoal suit, carrying a heavy leather briefcase. He belonged to Ethelgard Energy, a massive, shadowy conglomerate whose contracts always came with impossible risk and high reward. "Mr. Kane, Mr. Davies," Sterling stated, his voice flat and devoid of preamble, "I apologize for the intrusion. This is a matter of immediate national priority." "We're booked solid," Adam countered, folding his arms, "and we're officially in vacation recovery mode, Mr. Sterling." Sterling ignored the refusal, stepping into the garage. "This concerns Station 9, the Mojave Radio Telescope Array. We have a severe communications blackout. The last transmission indicated a simple mechanical failure, jammed azimuthal drive motors on Dish 3. Since then, total silence. We need eyes on the site, the motors manually rotated, and the main system reset. That station is remote, dangerous, and likely covered in snow this time of year. That's 3 days' work, minimum." Sterling set the heavy briefcase on Adam's workbench. The leather creaked under the weight. He flipped the twin brass latches and opened it. The interior was lined with thick bands of $100 bills. The amount was obscene, calculated to break any immediate resistance. "We are offering $50,000 for the 24 hours it takes to confirm status and restore operation, plus a 40% hazardous duty bonus for the silence." Adam stared at the money. The figure was paralyzing. The payment was too high, the urgency too absolute. It smelled like blood money, but the financial necessity was immediate. He knew something was fundamentally wrong with the job, but the void in his bank account was louder than his apprehension. "We'll take the job," Adam said, his voice clipped. "Charlie, grab the thermal packs and the satellite relay. We need the welding gear. We leave in 20 minutes. Charlie, still staring at the briefcase, nodded slowly. They quickly loaded their specialized climbing harnesses, heavy-duty tools, and cold-weather survival packs into the 4x4. The quiet sanctuary of the city was exchanged for the cold isolation of the mountain peaks. The quiet sanctuary of the city was exchanged for the cold isolation of the mountain peaks. Adam and Charlie pushed the specialized 4x4 up the treacherous, winding access road, leaving the living world behind. As they gained altitude, the atmosphere changed profoundly. The engine labored, whining in protest against the steep incline. The world below, the distant hum of traffic, the familiar sounds of civilization, dissolved into a thick blanket of cloud. The air in the cab grew thin and sharp, forcing both men to breathe deeply. They were concentrating entirely on the treacherous road ahead when the first sign of wrongness asserted itself. The natural sounds of the mountain, the faint buzz of insects, the normal roar of the wind sweeping the valley, began to dissipate, not gradually, but aggressively. Adam pulled the truck to a stop before the initial security perimeter gate, a heavy chain-link barrier blocking the path. He killed the engine, ready to input the override code. The resulting silence in the cab was immense, cold, and utterly immediate. "I hate this altitude," Charlie muttered, rubbing his temples. "My ears keep popping." Adam stepped out onto the gravel shoulder, his boots crunching loudly in the sudden vacuum of sound. He grabbed his utility bag, looking at the massive chained gate. It was wide open, pushed back against the rock face, the chain lock lying broken in the dirt. No sign of tampering, just immense force. He looked at the trees. The wind was blowing hard. The heavy branches of the stubborn scrub pines near the gate were swaying vigorously, their thick needles bending violently.
but the movement was entirely divorced from sound. The branches thrashed and whipped back and forth, yet there was no accompanying rustle of leaves or whisper of air, just the physical violence of motion rendered mute. It was a zone of absolute, dead silence, a terrifying acoustic anomaly. "Charlie, stay in the truck," Adam said, his voice low, the words feeling heavy and flat in the soundless environment. He forced his gaze to the ground, searching for the access panel near the broken lock. Instead, his boot nudged a soft, heavy mass. He looked down. A small flock of dead birds, sparrows and finches, lay scattered on the gravel. Their bodies were perfectly intact, their feathers undisturbed. They hadn't been hit by a car. They looked like they had simply fallen, killed mid-flight. Adam knelt beside the nearest one. He gently picked up the small, cold body. The creature was stiff, its limbs loose. He turned it over. Its eyes were missing. Not violently pecked out, but gone, leaving smooth, concave sockets. More disturbing, a dark, dry blood had leaked from its ear canals, staining the white feathers near its head. Charlie opened the window. "Adam, what is that? What happened to them?" Charlie winced, pressing his palm hard against his ear. "It's popping again! A terrible pressure!" Adam dropped the dead bird, the small body hitting the gravel with a soundless thud. He knew the jammed drive motors were the least of their worries. He raced back into the truck, heart hammering against his ribs. He restarted the engine, the roar now seeming muffled and distant. They continued the ascent, straight into the cloud layer, where the giant steel dishes of Station 9 awaited. Adam pushed the 4x4 through the thick, swirling layer of cloud, the immense steel skeleton of Station 9 slowly resolving through the mist. The facility was colossal, a sprawl of concrete buildings dominated by 3 massive parabolic dish antennas, giant concave voids pointed toward the sky. They were all frozen, locked in unnatural skewed positions, clearly non-functional. Adam parked the truck near the primary operations building. He and Charlie donned their heavy utility helmets, complete with comms and reinforced hearing protection. The silence here was complete, profound, and utterly heavy. They moved to the main entrance. The heavy, pressurized steel door was shut, but not locked. Adam placed his hand on the panel and pushed. The door hissed open, allowing a wave of frigid air and the scent of burnt electronics to escape. They stepped into the main lobby. It was a scene of silent, terrifying destruction. The room was a wreck, yet untouched by fire or conventional violence. It looked as if the air itself had violently exploded. Every clock on the wall had shattered outward. Heavy-duty office chairs were flipped over. The thick safety glass of the reception booth had been pulverized, not shattered into shards, but reduced to a fine, glittering dust that coated every surface like snow. "What could have done this?" Charlie whispered over the comms, his voice sounding thin and metallic through the headset. Adam swept his powerful inspection light across the debris. It was an immense, localized pressure wave, not kinetic, something internal. They moved forward, their boots instantly crunching into the deep layer of pulverized glass dust on the floor. The sound was deafening, violating the heavy silence. The sound of their own movement was amplified unbearably. Charlie stumbled, catching himself on a fallen monitor. He stopped, pressing his hands against the sides of his helmet. "Adam, I feel sick. Extreme dizziness. It's like I'm 10,000 feet underwater and the pressure is building inside my skull." Adam nodded. "It's the atmosphere. Hold tight." He examined a desk. Coffee mugs were not shattered. They were cracked perfectly in half, the breaks sharp and clean. The documents scattered on the desk were singed around the edges but not burned. The destruction was precise, consistent with an extreme, sudden barometric shift or sonic vibration. Adam tried to communicate, wanting to test the environmental effect. He raised his voice and yelled, "Hello, is anyone here?" The shout felt strangely muted, dead. His voice sounded flat and weak in his own ears, instantly absorbed by the heavy atmosphere. There was no echo. The sound seemed to travel only inches before being extinguished by the thick, sound-draining air. He looked back at Charlie, whose pallor was alarming. "We need to move quickly. The environment is unstable. We find the main control room and initiate the system reset." They pressed on, their boots crushing the fine glass dust underfoot, their every movement a deafening sound in the building's terrifying, silent core. Adam and Charlie moved cautiously through the silent, wrecked hallways, the crunch of pulverized glass their constant, overwhelming companion. They passed through offices and labs, finding the same scene repeated, materials cleanly fractured, furniture scattered, and an absolute absence of personnel. They reached the double steel doors of the main control room. Adam input the access code, and the heavy doors slid open with a muted, thick, pneumatic hiss. The room was vast, cold and dark, illuminated only by the faint flickering status lights of wall-to-wall servers that lined the periphery. The sheer volume of electronics should have created a loud, continuous mechanical hum, but the heavy silence of the environment swallowed the noise completely. Every screen within the room was displaying the same pattern, chaotic, high-frequency static noise. Charlie immediately checked the comms bench. "The radio's dead here too, Adam. And these internal monitors, they're all showing pure white noise. Something flooded the entire system." Adam moved to the primary control console, a massive metal desk covered with keypads and monitors. He reached out to plug in his diagnostics tablet, the first step to initiating the system reset. His hand made contact with the console's surface, and he recoiled instantly. A sharp, searing pain shot up his arm. The metal was hot, far too hot for the cold ambient temperature of the room. He pulled off his glove and gingerly touched the surface again. The metal didn't just feel hot, it felt active. He brought his inspection light closer. The metal was not shaking visibly, but Adam felt a pervasive vibration resonating through the material, a rapid, intense humming at a frequency so high his ears couldn't consciously register it, but his skin could feel the energy being dissipated as heat. The entire console was acting like a giant, silent speaker. "Charlie, keep back," Adam ordered, his voice tight. "The station is active, but it's not communicating, it's broadcasting." He scanned the console surface, his light catching a clear glass of water left haphazardly near a monitor. The water wasn't flat. Instead of the still surface expected in the soundless room, the water was forming precise, complex geometric ripples. The patterns were beautiful, terrifying, and completely organized, responding to a sound they could only feel, but not hear. The water was reacting to the invisible, silent frequency being emitted by the console. "What's that sound doing to the water?" Charlie whispered, his pallor returning. "It's not doing anything to it, Charlie. It's shaping it," Adam corrected, the scientific curiosity momentarily battling the rising fear. "It's an immense, silent, high-frequency signal, something the dishes picked up and the system is amplifying. It's broadcasting something we can't hear, but which is intense enough to cook the metal and rearrange liquid." Adam looked back at the shattered lobby, the cracked mugs, and the fine glass dust. The acoustic power needed to shatter thick safety glass into powder was astronomical. He realized with chilling certainty that the signal hadn't just broken the station, it had broken the men who worked here. The birds, the glass, the intense pressure, it was all caused by a sound wave only the birds could hear, but which was now overwhelming the very atmosphere of the facility. Adam knew they had to cut the power to the dishes before the silent frequency destroyed the entire facility, and them along with it. He grabbed a pair of heavily insulated cable cutters. "We need to bypass the main console," Adam said, moving toward a maintenance access panel built into the wall near the server racks. "The signal is feeding directly from the dishes. We cut the main power lines leading to the antennas." They reached the panel. Adam used his pry bar to pop the heavy cover open. The heat that rushed out was searing. Inside, the thick, heavy-gauge copper wiring, the main power feed for the 3 colossal dishes, had not only melted the plastic insulation, but had fused together into solid, twisted ribbons of metal. The heat generated by the silent signal was immense. Adam brought his cutter down onto the smoking fused metal, the effort immense. It was during this focused, straining action that the invisible attack found its target again. Adam let out a sharp cry of pain and dropped the heavy cutters onto the floor. He instinctively clutched his jaw, his face contorted in a grimace of pure agony. He felt a sharp, intense drilling sensation emanating from deep inside his head. It wasn't external sound, it was internal. The fillings in his molars, the silver amalgam and composites, were vibrating violently against the nerve endings. The silent frequency, amplified and contained by the metal of the fillings, was vibrating his teeth at a resonant frequency, creating a localized, excruciating pain that threatened to crack his jawbone. "Adam, what is it?" Charlie yelled, rushing to his friend's side. Charlie immediately stopped, his breath catching. He reached up, touching his nose. A slow, thick drip of dark blood began to fall onto his gloves. He looked at the blood, then back at Adam, realizing the terrifying implication. "The pressure! Adam, it's not just sound, it's heating our internal systems, the bird's ear canals, the fluid in our bodies." Adam nodded through clenched teeth, forcing the words out. "The silent frequency is acting as a microwave. It's boiling the soft tissue, the fluid in our inner ear, our sinuses. The fillings are just amplifying the pain." The situation was critical. Their internal biology was under siege from a sound they couldn't hear. Charlie's nosebleed intensified, the dark blood flowing freely now. The longer they stayed in the silent, pressurized room, the more severe internal damage would become. Brain hemorrhage, burst eardrums. Adam ignored the searing pain in his jaw. He seized the cutters again, his strength driven by raw survival instinct. "We cut the power, Charlie, now, before the microwave cooks us alive." He brought the cutters down onto the still fused copper, the metal screaming a silent protest against the disruption. They were in a race against an invisible, lethal sound wave. The effort was immense, requiring both men to heave against the thick, melted copper. As they strained against the cutters, trying to sever the power feed, a new sound cut through the heavy silence. A soft, wet, rhythmic sound emanating from a side corridor. Thud, thud, thud. It wasn't the sound of the high-frequency vibration. It was a slow, deliberate, physical impact. They froze, dropping the cutters. "What is that?" Charlie whispered, blood still dripping from his nose. Adam moved cautiously, ignoring the drilling pain in his molars, following the rhythmic sound toward a small office adjacent to the control room. He pushed the door open slowly, casting his inspection light into the small, darkened space. The room was intact, unlike the lobby. In the corner, facing the cold concrete wall, stood the figure. It was Dr. Aris, the site director, the last person who should have been here. He was swaying back and forth, slowly, rhythmically, slamming his forehead gently but deliberately against the concrete. Thud, thud, thud.
"Dr. Aris," Adam called out, his voice muted and heavy in the dead air. "Stop, we're here to help." The man did not react. He continued his slow, self-destructive rhythm, his back to them, the sickening wet thud echoing the violence of the sound wave. They moved toward him slowly, Charlie covering the rear. Adam reached the man and gently put a hand on his shoulder, attempting to turn him away from the wall. Dr. Aris resisted, his body rigid. When Adam finally forced him to turn, the horror was immediate and absolute. The doctor's face was a mask of immense traumatized agony. His eyes were bloodshot and staring vacantly. But his ears, the external cartilage and soft tissue, were gone. He had clawed his own ears off in a desperate, frenzied attempt to stop the silent frequency. The sides of his head were dark, wet, and raw with exposed, mangled tissue. "Stop the signal!" Dr. Aris screamed, the words raw, desperate, and broken by his trauma. "The sound! It's inside! It's killing us! Stop the signal!" His cry dissolved into a horrific gurgling sound as blood foamed from his mouth. His body immediately seized up, throwing him into a violent, uncontrolled seizure in Adam's arms. The convulsions were devastating and rapid, fueled by immense neurological trauma. Adam lowered the thrashing body gently to the floor, but the seizure was too extreme. Within seconds, Dr. Aris went limp, his eyes fixing on the ceiling, the life extinguished. The last witness, the only man who knew what the dishes had picked up, was dead, killed by a sound no human could hear. Adam knelt over the body of Dr. Aris, his mind reeling from the brutal death. Charlie, still bleeding from his nose, kept watch, the silence of the facility now terrifyingly absolute. "His comms unit," Adam rasped, spotting a small, ruggedized digital recorder clipped to the doctor's belt. He must have been logging the signal. Adam quickly retrieved the device. The exterior casing was shattered from the impact, but the internal memory light was still faintly green. He pulled the playback terminal from his kit and plugged it into the recorder's port, overriding the system lock. He needed to know what the giant dishes had been listening to. He pressed play. The audio that blasted through his headset was immediate and devastating. The initial sound was heavy static, the white noise of deep space. Then, at the 48-hour mark on the timestamp, the static was violently corrupted.
A sound entered the recording, a complex, multi-tonal shriek that defied human perception. It was synthetic, immense, and completely alien. It sounded like pure, agonized mathematics being screamed into existence. The sonic assault was instant, overwhelming their reinforced hearing protection. Adam and Charlie cried out, ripping the headsets from their ears. The sound was so fundamentally wrong that it triggered a primal physical reaction. Both men convulsed violently, their stomachs heaving. They stumbled back, collapsing against the server racks, vomiting onto the cold, glass-dusted floor. Even muted by the speakers, the recorded sound had triggered absolute physical rejection. As the waves of nausea subsided, Adam forced the headset back on, turning the volume down to a minimal, painful level. He couldn't risk playing the sound again. The audio continued, but the speaker was no longer Dr. Aris. It was a detached, calm, synthesized voice, the station's automated diagnostic log reader. Timestamp 48.01.05. Signal acquired. Source: designated deep space vector gamma 7. Analysis: non-linguistic. High-frequency resonant waveform. Caution: waveform exhibits properties inconsistent with natural stellar decay. Waveform exhibits targeted disruptive kinetic energy potential. The log continued, chillingly precise. Waveform identified not as communication, but as a weapon. Frequency generates resonance in crystalline and biological structures. Estimated effect: liquefaction of matter upon sustained exposure. Adam's blood turned to ice. The shattered glass, the broken bones, the missing eyes of the birds, it was all designed to liquefy their bodies. The silence wasn't a malfunction, it was the side effect of the high-frequency vibration destroying sound waves. The log reader delivered the final crushing truth. Status update: Dish 3 motors jammed in the acquisition vector. Antenna array locked onto deep space vector gamma 7. System currently broadcasting weapon frequency at 100% amplification.
Adam ripped the headset off, stumbling back against the wall. The entire facility wasn't broken. It was a giant, accidental weapon amplifier, broadcasting a biological dissolution frequency directly into the environment. The terrifying realization of the corporate betrayal hit him. Mr. Sterling and Ethelgard Energy hadn't hired them to fix a jam. They knew the signal was lethal. The job was a suicide mission designed to silence the transmission permanently, or at least identify a flaw without risking their own personnel. They had been sent to a kill zone. Adam ripped the headset off, stumbling back against the wall. The entire facility wasn't broken. It was a giant, accidental weapon amplifier, broadcasting a biological dissolution frequency directly into the environment. The terrifying realization of the corporate betrayal hit him. Mr. Sterling and Ethelgard Energy hadn't hired them to fix a jam. They knew the signal was lethal. The job was a suicide mission designed to silence the transmission permanently, or at least identify a flaw without risking their own personnel. They had been sent to a kill zone. The heavy silence of the control room was finally, violently broken. The high-frequency energy they had only felt moments ago now became audible, a rapidly escalating, deafening mechanical whine. The sound was agonizing, tearing at their eardrums and vibrating the very floor beneath their boots. The sound was causing physical failure everywhere. The wall-to-wall server racks began to spark violently. The overhead fluorescent lights, the tough industrial fixtures, could not withstand the vibration. With a series of sharp, violent explosions, the lights blew out one by one, showering the room in glass and sparks. "Charlie, we're leaving, now!" Adam roared, his own voice sounding thin and distorted in his ears from the immense pressure. They stumbled over the debris, scrambling toward the heavy steel doors. But the greatest danger lay behind the main control panel, the immense observation glass overlooking the parabolic dishes. It was thick, reinforced safety glass, but it was already failing. Adam looked up. A pattern of sharp, spiderweb cracks began to spread across the entire sheet of glass, radiating outward from a central point. The frequency was tearing the silica structure apart. "The dishes, they're amplifying it to the max!" Charlie screamed, stumbling against the cold metal of the desk. Adam reached the access panel. He knew the heavy steel door of the control room offered their only chance of survival.
He shoved Charlie through the opening first. "Go, get to the truck. I'll seal this door," Adam yelled, turning back to engage the heavy locking bolt. He didn't make it. With a final devastating scream, the immense sound wave generated by the dishes reached critical mass. The observation glass shattered violently, imploding inward with a massive, deafening boom. The force of the frequency hit the room like a physical blast wave, a white-hot shock of sound and pressure. Adam was hurled across the room, his body slamming into the far wall. The impact was immediately followed by a searing pain in his ears, nose, and eyes. He collapsed to the floor, his hands instinctively clamping over his head, trying desperately to shield the fluid and soft tissue inside his skull. Charlie, already staggering through the doorway, was caught by the edge of the blast. He pitched forward, falling heavily into the corridor, his body convulsing in shock. The room was filled with the deafening sound of a sustained, high-pitched ringing, the sound of ruptured eardrums and damaged nerves. The silent weapon had reached its final, audible, destructive potential. They lay broken, their minds under siege, trapped in the vibrating kill zone. The signal has started. Tell me in the comments what is the loudest sound you have ever heard. Subscribe for episode 2.